One of the most significant holidays in the Jewish calendar year is almost upon us, and it is called Hanukkah. Now, most people really think that Hanukkah is just kind of like a holiday for the kids, not such a big deal. You know, you eat latkes, you eat some donuts, you spin the dreidel, get some Hanukkah gelt, you light a candle, light a menorah, and call it a day. The reality is that Hanukkah is extremely significant. It does have a sister holiday called Purim, which is also extremely significant. And the reason most people know about Hanukkah and don't know about Purim is because Hanukkah falls in December, close to Christmas. So it has the good fortune of just giving something for the Jews to do while the non-Jews are celebrating their particular holiday. But it is a very different holiday, and it is incredibly significant. My name is Yitz Wyne. I'm the Rabbi of Young Israel, Aish of Las Vegas. Welcome to the Life is Great community. And let's take a few minutes and explore the depth of Hanukkah. And I'm going to pull out one particular message that I think is transformative in your life. The first thing that we need to know about Hanukkah is the name means dedication. It's a holiday about dedication. In other words, like this, dedicated to what? Well, on the broad sense, it's dedicated to the most important values in your life. On a more narrow sense, it's going to be being dedicated to being Jewish and living Jewish values. Hence, those people that say, let's do a Christmas tree and a Hanukkah menorah are really missing the boat. You know who else is really missing the boat and has totally perverted the holiday? Those people stand up and say, it's all about religious freedom. You can celebrate whatever you want and however you want. No, no, no. Hanukkah is about miracles. It's a time of recognizing the miracles in our life today and then creating a sense of dedication towards our values because of those miracles. Where am I coming up with this? So let's go back. Again, the first thing is that there are two major miracles historically that happened that are connected with the holiday of Hanukkah. The first one goes back historically to around the year 165 BCE. It's right after, Alexander the Great rides into Jerusalem. Alexander the Great, he was a cultured Greek. His rabbi was Aristotle, okay? He believed in God. He actually believed in one God. And he rides in, takes over Jerusalem, and then from there, after his death, then you have a lot of problems that begin. The Greek Empire splits between the Syrian Greeks in the north, the Egyptian Greeks on the south. The Syrian Greeks, led by a general, Antiochus. So they made it their goal not only to politically rule the world, but to culturally rule the world. So the Greeks began a campaign it wasn't just against the Jews, it was everywhere where they ruled, of taking whatever culture existed and turning it over to becoming a Greek culture, which of course in most of the world was a tremendous advancement because of Alexander, because of his education, even though he died young, and his influence. The Greeks were so far ahead of the normal pagans around. I mean, there were people engaged in child sacrifice, all sorts of terrible things. What did the Greeks bring? The Greeks brought to the world. They brought the idea of writing. They brought the idea of sense of democracy. They brought the idea of philosophy. They brought the idea of the beauty of humanity, the beauty of in the human body, and there were a lot of really positive things that they brought to the table. Unfortunately, one of the things they brought to the table was diametrically opposed to Judaism, which was do it our way or no way. And they came and they said, well, how are we going to get rid of the Jews? And again, they didn't want to kill the Jews. They just wanted to kill the Judaism in the Jews so the Jews would assimilate to becoming Greek. So they came out with a series of laws. They forbade the Jews to celebrate Shabbos and the holidays. They forbade the Jews to do ritual circumcision and also to learn Torah. So they understood, Antiochus and his band of evil thieves, they understood that if you get the Jews to get rid of the sense of holiness of time, and you get the Jews by not celebrating Shabbos, and if you get the Jews to get rid of the holiness of a personhood and their actions represented by circumcision, and if you get the Jews to get rid of the sense of holiness by thoughts and morality, a God-given morality in the Torah, so then the Jews will stop being Jewish very, very quickly. Now, there were a lot of Jews that went along with this, and we call them today Hellenists. And because it was so much easier, like, here, just be part of the society that is a good society, a decent society compared to the rest of the world. And you know what? You don't have to keep all the commandments. So there are a lot of Jews that went over that way. But then eventually there was a revolt that happened in the town of Modi'in by Matisyahu and his 5 sons. And they were saying, no, we're not going to give up Shabbos. We're not giving up circumcision. We're not giving up learning Torah. We're not going to worship idols. We're not going to do this. And we are going to be dedicated to the values that we got from our father, who got it from his father, who got it from his father, who got it from his father, all the way back to God at Mount Sinai. So we're not giving up Judaism. And then they started a guerrilla warfare. It was a guerrilla war that lasted for decades. And lo and behold, eventually the Jewish people, through this guerrilla warfare, even though they were undermanned and underarmed and under-equipped, and they were spread out in the hills, and even they were fighting against Jews. It was a civil war as well. The Hellenists, joined the Greeks. So this group of Jews, which eventually became known as the Maccabees. So the Maccabees, when they won, and again, it was over a period of decades, but the initial real victories, when they made it to Jerusalem, they made it back to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and then they went and they rededicated the temple, hence the word Hanukkah, and they lit a menorah. They only had enough oil, kosher oil, so to speak, pure oil, to last for 1 day, and then ended up lasting 8 days. And they said, this is another miracle. So there were many miracles that happened in the war, the miracle of actually winning the war. And then there was one very subtle miracle of lighting the oil in the menorah that should have lasted for 1 day and it lasted for 8 days. Okay? 2 miracles. And then the rabbis of that day said, because of these miracles, we are going to permanently establish a holiday for all the Jews in this season, this time, falling on the Hebrew date of the 25th day of the month of Kislev, which always will fall in the winter season when it is darkest. And this symbolically, we are lighting the lights to illuminate the world. And we're going to celebrate, recognize these miracles, celebrate these miracles. The recognition of these 2 miracles will help us identify the miracles in our own life by the fact that we saw the Jews of yesterday, when they experienced miracles, they became more dedicated to their Judaism. So therefore, that's going to help us look in our lives for the different kinds of miracles and help us renew our dedication to being Jewish and our dedication to God and living a holy life. That is your essence of Hanukkah. So now, of course, I gave a very large story in a very brief way. So let's fill in a little bit of the gaps. But first, I have to dispel the notion of the wonderful Jewish comedian who said, what is Hanukkah about all anyway? We had enough oil for last 1 day. It lasted 8 days. So what happened? We're celebrating the fact that the Jews bought 1 and got 7 for free. No, it's not that. And then people will, again, as I had mentioned, they'll come and they'll pervert it. They'll say, well, it's, the Greeks did not want us to celebrate our Judaism, and we were allowed to celebrate our Judaism. So it's religious freedom. Nope, that's not what it's about either. It's about dedication. Remember, these Maccabees, they went to war. They were willing to die in order to be Jewish. Get that? They were willing to die to be Jewish. And then you had another small miracle, and because they were so dedicated, and by the way, many of the Maccabees did die to be Jewish, and they didn't really know if they were doing the right thing. I mean, there's a lot of times in life we're tested, and we think we're doing the right thing, and we're saying, God, let me see a sign. And sometimes the sign is not, are you being successful? Many times, success in doing the wrong thing is just part of the test to see, can I pull out of doing the wrong thing? How many people have you known for years and years and years became very prosperous, and they were doing things a little sketchy, They weren't really doing things the right way, but they were prospering until the house of cards eventually comes falling down, right? There's many people that can be involved in lousy stuff for a long time, and because God is slow to anger, exhibiting tremendous patience, it's all part of the test. So here you have these Jews fighting against the Greeks, fighting against the Hellenized Jews. They didn't really know whether or not they were doing the right thing. They thought they were, but they didn't know. Eventually what happened was they go in the temple, they clean it up, they light that menorah. It's supposed to last one day, it lasts 8 days. And they took that as a kiss from the Almighty. As the Almighty said, you know what, you are doing the right thing. So hence we have two different kinds of miracles. Understanding, by the way, that a miracle is something that exists outside of the normal patterns that we are used to. So that where if I said to you, what's a greater miracle, the splitting of the sea or the birth of a baby, everyone who's had a child, been a witness to a birth of a baby, will say, oh, a birth of a baby, that's a bigger miracle, right? But a lot of people, we don't make a big deal of it. I mean, you say, yeah, you had a baby, mazel tov, and then you go on, yeah, okay, that kind of stuff. And the splitting of the sea, we talk about every single day, and the holiday of Passover and everything. The splitting of the sea, you have movies made over it. You don't have a lot of movies made over like a birth of a baby. I mean, a couple, documentary type things. But it's not like celebrated as a big miracle. But the reality is of course, birthing of a baby is a much greater miracle than the splitting of the sea. Splitting the sea, God went and split the sea, right? Blowing a little wind, splits the sea. But because a baby happens all the time, every day, it happened to every one of us, right? We all experience being born, and then many of us have children, and you witness it. You say, well, that's the pattern. That's the pattern. And thank God we live in a day and age where infant fatality is rare, unlike, the times of Hanukkah, right? Unlike 200 years ago, right? Okay. So now when we look at the world and you say, okay, there's a pattern, we intellectually understand there's a miracle about having a child, but it doesn't fully change us. I mean, it changes us to the degree that almost every new father is changed on some level, and every new mother's changed on some level. You look at the beautiful mountains, you say, oh, what a miracle, the amazing sunset. But you don't really change your life because of it. You kind of enjoy it, right? When do you change your life? When you recognize a miracle that you're not used to. You're driving in the car, and all of a sudden there's a bizarre car accident all around you, and you come out scot-free, and you say, wow, God, thank you so much. And then you're a really good boy for like a day or two, right? And then you're back to your old ways. As soon as you get back into the normal things that whatever you're doing. So we have to recognize that the point of a miracle, when you open your eyes and you're looking for the first kind of miracles, the miracles in war, these are physical miracles. And you look around, you say, wow, I see there's a break in the pattern of life. That's what a miracle is. It's something new, something different. Then you're supposed to say, okay, I'm dedicated. The other kind of miracle is of the spiritual nature. Now, even though the menorah, the light lasting for 8 consecutive days, that is a physical miracle. But the light is symbolic of Torah and godliness and God's presence. And here we're saying God's presence was only supposed to be around for one day, and God's presence was very bright, so to speak, for 8 days. So that's why we look at it as a kiss from the Almighty. There are those spiritual miracles, those spiritual awakenings that they have. Some of the most wonderful people I know are people that are recovering addicts, recovering alcoholics or whatnot, tremendously spiritual. Because they will turn to you and they will literally talk to you about the miracles that they've noticed in their lives. Rabbi Abraham Twersky, who not only was a rabbi but was he had a drug and alcohol rehab center. So he was amazing. He used to say that if he was ever, as a rabbi, he knew lots of doctors, lawyers, accountants types, right? So he said, whenever I recommend a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, where do I go? I go to like my AA meetings, my 12-step meetings, and I find people that are active in recovery, And those are the people that I recommend for the new jobs. And so someone said to him, well, Rabbi, are you just being like a nice guy because, these people are in recovery, so you give them a helping hand? He says, no. He goes, who else do you know that every single day of their life will do an inventory on their life and will actually recognize the miracles that are happening in their life and be grateful for those miracles and change their life because of the miracles? It's like, whoa, that's a different kind of person. That's a different kind of person. The holiday of Hanukkah is here to tell us that we don't have to be an addict. Right? You don't have to go to AA to do an inventory in your life. And you don't have to go to AA to say, I want to actually correct myself and recognize the miracles in life. The holiday of Hanukkah is for humanity. It's a Jewish holiday, but it's a humanity holiday to remind us that God is always performing miracles, some in the physical sense, some of the more spiritual nature that are a little more subtle. And we are to take these miracles, look for them so that we see more of them, and then make a dedication in our lives to be better people, to follow along closer with Torah values because of God's involvement in our life. That is a significant holiday. Okay, so right now let's bring around Dana Rutherford. She's our producer. She's the one who's going to read your questions that you send over to me, which you can do by sending an email to rabbiyitzwyne@gmail.com. That's rabbiyitzwyne@gmail.com. Dana, welcome.
Hi.
Give us the good news.
Hi, everyone.
What's on people's minds?
All right, so we have two really good questions today, and the first goes like this. It's my son's first birthday and our first Hanukkah together as a young family. My husband doesn't really know much about Hanukkah, and his family celebrates Christmas. How can I create a joy in celebrating Hanukkah as a family when I know my son will be heavily exposed to Christmas?
Okay, so I got good news. Hanukkah is 8 days. You get it? So what you do is you make sure, first of all, that you actually celebrate 8 days. Now, the celebration of Hanukkah does not have to be a big deal. It could be a half hour. And as a matter of fact, that's really how long it should be, is you gather your son, even though your son's 1 year old now, but you're creating memories. So the memories are, even though he's there and you light the candles, and then for a half hour, you tell over the story of Hanukkah, you get a dreidel, you have food, you make your latkes, make your donuts. So what's happening is, and so even when a child is young, you're creating these memories. There are songs we sing on Hanukkah. The important thing here is to be disciplined, that it is an 8-day experience. You don't have to give gifts. I mean, you could give, when I was growing up, my father used to give me $1 silver on the first day, 2 on the next day, 3 on the next day, 4 on the next day. These are the days they were silver. They were actually full of silver. And foolish me, I used to go to the store and buy a Reese's peanut butter cup with it. It was ridiculous. Anyway, if I kept all that money, oh my gosh, I'd have so much today. Anyway, so the thing is this, and when my kids were young, I gave them $50, each $50. But the key is create memories. That's the idea. Memories are done by the senses. You have the lights, the candles, and eventually he'll light his own menorah. You have the food, like the latkes or the jelly donuts. You have the actions, the playing the dreidel, and that kind of stuff, and singing some songs. And if you do these rituals every single day, then for 8 days, then as the children grow, you can actually have the discussions of what are the miracles in your life? Where do you see God in your life? Do you see any interesting things going on? And what does it mean to be Jewish? What does it mean to be dedicated to being Jewish? What is a person who's dedicated to being Jewish? What do they look like? How do they behave? What does the non-dedication look like? And then, there will come a time when the child's going to wake up and say, well, it's a little crazy. We're being dedicated to Judaism. And why do we have a Christmas tree? Why does my family have a Christmas tree? You are going to get that question, but that's the question you want. That's the question you want. You want to have those questions and those discussions. And then you end up seeing where each thing fits. So.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. The last question says, my sister's always talking about how Hanukkah is a time of miracles. How can I start to see miracles or pray for them? I feel so small sometimes. And when she talks about it, I want to be able to see them in my life too.
Excellent. So the question is, how do I see miracles in my life? Look for them. Now, the first thing is because you know what the normal patterns of your life are, right? The normal pattern is that if you are speeding and you get pulled over by a policeman, he's going to give you a ticket. So when the policeman doesn't give you a ticket, that's a miracle. That's a miracle. That's the Almighty finding grace upon you and then going through the policeman. When a person does certain things that are foolish and they know they should hurt themselves and they don't get hurt. All right. When a person works with a lot of effort to get a particular client, and it doesn't really come from that client, but it comes from somewhere else, someone who they didn't put a lot of effort into, they say, that's a miracle. They should recognize that. You understand? It's like, that's God's thumbprint. So if you're keeping your eyes open, you want to see them, you're going to see them, and you'll see them in a plentiful way. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for being part of the Life is Great community. And we will be back soon with another Life is Great episode.